But yeah, I mean, if BQN can lose at code golf by writing better code, that's a win in life, right? It's much better actually. So
depends what you're living for, Marshall. I live for the character count. Welcome to another episode of ArrayCast. I'm your host, Connor, and today with me, we're going to have a discussion with our four panelists, and we're going to start off by going around and doing brief introductions. So we'll start with Stephen, then go to Bob, then go to Adam, and then go to Marshall.
I'm Stephen Taylor. Happy New Year. I'm an APL and Q programmer.
I'm Bob Therriault. Happy New Year to everyone as well. And I'm a J enthusiast.
I'm Adám Brudzewsky. I represent APL here.
I'm Marshall Lochbaum. I'm a former J programmer and Dyalog developer, and now I make BQN.
And as mentioned before, my name's Connor. I am a polyglot programmer, primarily C++, but I'm a huge array language fan. So I think we're going to do two short announcements. We'll go to Adam first for his one announcement, and then over to Marshall.
So the Twitter poll on the name for this podcast that I've been studying with Richard Park came out with a very clear answer. APLcast, notation as a tool of thought. No question about that. Now, of course, there's a question as to how do we spell it? Because Connor said it originally without a space, an APL uppercase C cast, and then I put a space in, and he protested, and I say maybe it looks strange because of deprivation. Maybe we'll have to do another poll on how to spell it, in which case we'll put a link in the show notes.
I mean, I wouldn't say I protested the space. I just like patterns. And there are, I thought, 3 podcasts, CPPcast, LambdaCast, that definitely don't have spaces. And I thought that our podcast was ArrayCast, but then I actually went and looked it up in the podcast registry, and we have it named the space array space cast. So that was the thing I was going to mention is like, what is, I know what it's named in the podcast registry. What is our official name? Do I not know the name of our podcast?
So the good news is whether you put a space in or not, people will just assume it's whichever one they want it to be.
Actually, that's brilliant, Marshall, because that's actually kind of what happened. I always wanted capital A array, capital C cast, no space. That's what I was always going for. Mm-hmm. But a number of people said, no, it's got to be the ArrayCast. And as soon as you go the space array cast, you're putting spaces in. So when I registered it officially, I had the ArrayCast because we should do it that way. And then as time went on, I started to condense it to capital A array, capital C cast because I'm doing most of the publishing work on it and referring to it, and nobody pushed back. So it's evolution is what it is, I guess.
No, it can be. The website currently says the space array space cast.
Yes, it does.
The ArrayCast without a space.
But then as it becomes more known, it's just the ArrayCast, or just, hey, I heard on ArrayCast. Have you heard the latest ArrayCast?
So that's the thing, is that colloquially, at least amongst the people that I speak to about CPPcast, no one ever says the CPPcast. They say CPPcast. But it seems like it's pick your poison. You get to do whatever you want with our podcast. And officially, we don't have an official name. Or we do?
Well, actually, I was going to say, I don't think anybody was referring to it as the ArrayCast, or at least not many people were, until you brought it up on this episode.
Oh, no.
Maybe they'll go that route again. Officially...
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, officially, it is the ArrayCast. That's not how I refer to it.
All right. Well, a lot of ambiguity there.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll let the listeners decide. Anyways, APLcast, a new podcast coming to podcast players near you soon. Now that it has a name, hopefully.
As I used to say when I was a kid, call me anything you want. Just don't call me late for dinner.
All right. With that, we'll go over to Marshall for his announcement.
My announcement is that this is something that I think both me and Adam have noticed over time. Thinking about the tool that's for BQN is called BQNcrate, but it's based on an older tool that Adam made for older and better tool, really, that Adam made for APL called APLcart, which both of these list a large number of code snippets that you can look up And then the idea is that you ask it, I want to solve this quadratic equation. And so you type in quadratic equation or whatever, and you'll see a snippet that tells you how to do that. But what I found is the way that APLcart was originally designed to have, the idea is it'll put the arguments it'll make it so that it's one function called on the arguments. So particularly if you have like a train or something, this can make it more complicated, where you have this complicated thing in parentheses that's difficult to read, and the arguments on the outside. The idea is that you can then copy paste that function. But I think what a lot of people want from these tools is not really to have just code they can copy paste. To me, that's what a library is for. And I'm hoping that BQN supports libraries pretty well. But instead, you would like to know how to compute the thing. And a lot of times it's easier to express it by putting the variables on the inside, making it into an expression, sometimes repeating variables. So that's what I've done. I've gone through all 1,000 something expressions on BQNcrate and changed the ones that I think should be changed. Some of the longer ones I got a little lazy, but generally BQNcrate now focuses more on expressions, so it's easier to read. And that's my announcement. If you've been having trouble with all the tacit code on BQN, try it again. If you still think it's too tacit, ask me about it. And maybe it's an expression that I got lazy about and I can actually change it.
I've actually also started adding rather than changing things to APLcart, where I add alternatives. So some people have complained that the tacit code I have there is too tacit. It's too hard for them to read. And so I've started adding also explicit alternatives. So certain things you can actually add the search term tacit or explicit, and it will show you only that version of it. But there's a long way to go.
Oh, yeah.
Because APLcart has like over 3,600 entries. So.
It's actually interesting that this topic is coming up right now, because just earlier this morning, I was, speaking of LeetCode, which we're going to be talking about later, solving a LeetCode problem from the most recent contest on Saturday. And one of the pieces of it was creating an inclusive range between values X and Y, which we've actually talked about, I think, now twice on this episode or on this podcast. We'll link once again to Stephen's article that shows a really nice use of some of the Q stuff. But I was surprised because I've written this function a couple times, but whenever I go back to writing it, and I know it's in the Fin APL idioms as well, I'm always surprised how complicated it is for at least the inclusive one as well. And I went to both. I think actually I couldn't find it on APLcart, but I was looking for it on BQN, and it was under the search term contiguous, or is it? No, consecutive values between X0 and Y0 inclusive. And it has a very complicated point-free expression or tacit expression. And I just was like kind of scratching my head reading it, being like, okay, this is right. Anyways, and then I was trying to do this in J because the ultimate problem involved prime numbers, which is like anytime there's prime numbers, it's like, well, J has those built in. I'm going to forget about my favorite languages, BQN and APL, and then J makes it so easy. And technically, you can go to APL, and I think in the defunds library, they have the same thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if BQN has a library for that as well. But anyways, I digress. Writing it not tacit and just using a defun is like so much simpler, which is the long-winded point, or the point of my long-winded tale here, is that it's probably great that you guys are both adding this, because it is pretty intimidating, I think, going and seeing that that's the expression for like a sequence of contiguous values between X and Y inclusive, because a lot of languages like Haskell and Rust, they just have like a double dot operator or like a 3-character operator for creating that range. And it's kind of interesting when you think that it's like, it would be that difficult to do it in a language like APL or BQN or J. And the point is, it's not, I think, if you do it just not point free or tacit. Not sure if people have folks or even followed what I was saying for most of the time, but
yeah. Well, so there are two entries. There's one where it assumes that the first character is less than or equal to the second one. And then there's one that does it in either order, which is quite a bit more complicated. I mean, I wouldn't. So this is the one that's ordered is a 6-character function here.
Which what do I search for that?
I just looked for consecutive values would work.
Oh yeah, that one's way simpler. I didn't find that one.
Yeah.
So interesting that like I didn't actually look for the word consecutive. I was looking for range, and I think for some reason.
Yeah, which this is one of the cases actually that's pretty borderline on this. I chose to keep it tacit. So you have a train that's left tack plus range composed with span swapped. But if you do it as an expression, it has to write the left argument twice, but it's only 3 functions. It's like x plus range of y span x. So in this case, I felt like this was something that you would probably use outside. Like you would use this as a function in a larger context. So I felt like it made sense to keep it tacit, but maybe it should be an expression instead, because it's 3 characters shorter if you write it as an expression.
Yeah, I take back mostly what I said though, because I was looking for the shorter expression of these two, but did not see it.
Yeah.
So it's actually not that bad. The one that I was looking at is a little bit more complicated for sure. Sorry, Adam?
In this context, I would like to, what do you call it? Promote a service called tacit.help. That's a whole URL.
Oh, maybe I should announce this too. We have one for BQN now.
I don't even know what this is news to me.
It does not have its own website, but I put it up on the BQN community page, so you can find it from there, and we'll put it into the show notes.
Okay, so tacit.help is for APL only, and what it does is it takes a tacit expression and it translates it to a defin.
Does it have support for typing or no?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't assume anything. It just converts to a monetic and dyadic separately, and then it is what it is.
Oh, I'm trying to type BQN into APL, and it's just saying invalid token. And I'm like, what's going on here? I'm at the wrong one.
So the BQN version of this is saltysylvie.github.io/BQN tacit helper, which is exactly as memorable.
What? Okay, I'm just going to go find some APL code.
Should I stick it in the chat so that Connor can...
I'm on a different computer. I'm recording on one computer and on a...
Well, can't you open it on this computer?
That's actually true.
Then you can have a tacit helper open in either computer. You can just be very tacitly helped.
Every computer needs a tacit helper. Wow, when did this get created? I assume this is pretty recent, otherwise.
This was, 3 days, 4 days?
Ago?
5 days ago.
When did the APL one happen?
That's been around for a while.
Wow.
It's a few months, I think.
Jay's had one for a year or two, a couple of years anyway.
Jay's got one too? What's yours one called?
I'll have to go look at it. It's an add-on. It's a file.
Oh, but it's not online.
It's not online.
It's inside Jay. Gotcha. Oh, yeah, that's true. I do know that. What am I talking about? Yeah, that's like my favorite foreign function. It's like 13 colon something.
No, that's the other way, right?
That's tacify and explicit.
Yeah.
Right?
We can go both ways.
At definition time.
Oh, yeah. Which is even better if you're a beginner and can never figure out what you need to do.
Yeah.
Although I think it only works for a percentage of things. It usually works for monadic tacit expressions, but I've had troubles with dyadic tacit expressions.
I mean, we can say right up front, not every tacit thing can be converted to an equivalent explicit form, and not every explicit thing can be converted to tacit form. That's just how it is.
No, I think every tacit thing should be writable as explicit.
It's definitely not true for APL.
Are you thinking about like scoping issues or what?
Yeah. Scoping and capsule issues and things like that. So now we're getting really technical.
Yeah. Okay. But if you write the computations that you need to do ahead of time outside of your function, then you can write everything as explicit.
Yeah. I think we should put a pin in this because we're going to turn this whole episode into a tacit versus explicit. We've got these great websites. The takeaway, because we're still in the announcement zone or land, the takeaway is there's been some improvements to BQNcrate. I was about to say BQNcart, and that's not what it's called. BQNcrate and APLcart. There's these two websites. Also, there's one, not a website for J, but inside J. So lots of tacit and, tacit tools.
And J does have its phrases, right?
Yes.
We've got the phrases which you've had forever, but they're not searchable. And if we did do that, and there has been talk of that, we would call it jalopy.
Wait, explain that.
I don't even know what that is.
Jalopy's a old beater car. So it starts with a J, and it's in the vein of carts and, not crates so much, but I guess an old car is a crate too. So yeah.
Well, feel free to fork the APLcart or, of course, BQNcrate code. It doesn't actually care about the language much. It's just an interface.
Yeah, they've diverged a fair amount. So check both. I don't know which one you want.
Well, right now I'm involved with the wiki, so it's just sort of a side. Yeah. Somebody mentioned it, and we'll see if we ever get to it. We have phrases. That's what we do. Alrighty.
We will wrap up those announcements that seems like might have gone 20 minutes. So hopefully the listeners are still here, or the listener. At this point, we will transition to today's topic, which is going to be an amalgamation of things. So in general, I believe the topic is going to be sort of the topic of recreational programming versus, production programming, we'll call it. And this we talked about in the past, sort of talking about sort of advent of code, and we're going to, snowball leak code into that, and code golfing. There's several code golfing websites. But I think before we start talking about that, we got a sort of tangential email from a listener by the name of Alex. It's quite a long email, so I'm going to sort of skip to the part where Alex is asking a question. Hopefully I'm going to get through this in a minute or two, and then we're going to sort of start a discussion about the questions that he asks within this email. So it starts off, my question boils down to which language, aka array programming language, should I start studying? The ArrayCast doesn't seem too picky and encourages all the different approaches to array or Iversonian style languages, seeing as you have guests in to talk about Q and J and of course APL, etc. As someone who is not a comparative scholar of languages, it's hard for me to make a decision about which language to devote a bit of time to study. A tiny bit of background on myself. I've had around 17 years where I worked as a historian with a lot of different field work under my belt. I did a lot of writing, several books and a PhD before I decided to add some more technical skills to my quiver and some new mental models to boot. I am now 1 year into a new career and life as a machine learning engineer. And so they do a lot of stuff with Python. We're sort of going to skip the rest, but so they're going towards working in machine learning. So one of my primary interests is in picking up J or APL or whatever is to find a tool that I can grow alongside as I deepen my understanding of mathematics and that I can use and that will accompany me going forward. Key criteria for my choice include the following 4 things. 1, my choice language should have a good community support, especially since there aren't voluminous books and online material to offer guidance and support. 2, my choice language should be production ready. 3, my choice language should be mathematics friendly. And 4, my choice language should have good, up-to-date introductory materials that offer lots of opportunity for practical use and practice. Out of all this, I seem to have settled on Dyalog APL, even though my instinct and gut seems to have a preference for J. Dyalog APL just seems to be going through somewhat of a community and materials renaissance at the moment. And for a beginner, it seems like there would be a lot of support available. Also, too many people seem to dismiss J as being an alternative take, which I read them as saying that it's a bit of a dead end, which makes me slightly worried. My current plan is to work my way through Dr. Raymond Polivka's new APL book and see where I'm at the end of that. Please let me know if you have a better recommendation for something that's practically focused, that takes you from zero to competent, and that's up to date and perhaps also mathematically focused, bearing in mind that I'm basically a tadpole when it comes to mathematics currently. End of the portion of this letter. There was a little bit more at the end as well, thanking us and saying happy array programming. At this point, I will hand it over to the listeners. What should we recommend? Or I said listeners. Hand it over.
Okay,
we're gonna throw the question right back to the listeners. What do you think? We're gonna hand it over to the panelists. And what should we tell Alex here? We've got Stephen holding up a book, Fun Q. We just talked to Nick about, and we've got Bob raising his hand. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. The first thing on the really good side, Alex talks about the fact that we don't seem to, favor one language over the other. I'm glad he came back with that because I agree with that. The idea is not to pit one array language against another array language. They have their purposes. Some are better for some things. It's almost a personal style. Some people prefer one over the other. There's nothing wrong with that. We just want to promote array languages, not just we're not the JCast, we're the ArrayCast. So that's like. That
being said, go with J.
Well, and then the other side of it, and this is the other side of it. He says he feels J is a bit of a dead end. I really don't see that. There's a lot of things developing in J. Threads are being added in the next version. There's an extended long integer speed up that's going to be quite phenomenal if you're interested in, certain forms of mathematics. There'll be things you can do there that are much quicker than they used to be. It's not a dead end. It's developing and it continues to develop. But having said that, the criteria he gave, one was community. I think all the communities are really good. I would recommend, and I think I actually did recommend to him that he look at the APL farm. And just that as a discussion, it's a Discord/matrix.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, Siri doesn't understand. I'll have to do something about that, Siri. Anyway, the APL forum is a Discord/matrix forum where all the languages are represented. There's lots of discussion. And I mean, I'm not a beginner, but from what I see, it's very supportive. There's a lot of support going on. And I find that across the array languages that there is a lot of support. So I guess that's just my two takes on that. J isn't a dead end, and support, I don't think that's a problem with the array languages. And I'll let somebody else take the rest of it, take a run from there.
Should we go back to Stephen? Stephen, you held up the FunQ book. That's where you think Alex might be interested in starting?
Well, it's pretty hard to miss, isn't it? We reviewed it recently. It's a recent book. It tells you how to do machine learning stuff using Q. Q's got machine learning add-ons and toolkits in it, and some fairly tight integration with Python that's pretty useful for ML. So, like Bob, I'm not minded to promote one language over another, but Q's got a pretty strong offering there.
All right, we're going either to Adam or Marshall, and I feel like, too, we should, because, what's the question, I think, or a side question to the one of what's the language to start with, is there one thing that, delineates each of these languages from each other? So if we're talking about Q versus J versus Dyalog APL versus BQN, is there one thing, there might not be, but when I look at this list of 4 things: community support, production ready, mathematics friendly, and should have good up-to-date introductory materials. I mean, I think we can sort of scratch off number 3, not in that it's not important, but all 4 of these array languages and just sort of Iversonian array languages in general are all going to be mathematics friendly.
I disagree. J by far wins on that point. Right? It has way more specialized mathematical primitives in the core language.
Okay, so this is perfect then. So, along with going is maybe that's what sets up J apart from the other languages. Is that's not something I would have known off the top of my head, other than the fact that I'm not sure if you're referring to primes and stuff, but maybe there's a whole other set of outside of prime functions they also have.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing. Math is not just one field that you can choose to support. I'm not convinced. While J has a lot more invested in doing mathematical stuff, I'm not convinced that this necessarily translates to being great at mathematical programming of any kind. So if you're into number theory, J definitely is better because it has these extended precision numbers and a lot of things you can do with them. For a lot of other things, I mean, linear algebra, pretty much everything, but J and APL at least are both pretty focused on linear algebra. Other stuff, kind of hard to say. Like if you're interested in like numerical optimization, I don't think J has anything extra to offer in that area. I mean, there it's not like built-in functionality isn't what you want. You just want to write the thing, and it's much more of an ordinary programming task, even though it would be considered part of applied mathematics.
So an example of something, I mean, yeah, it's things like in statistics, probability things. I saw this list of how to write certain APL primitives in the equivalent BQN. And so for factorial, you'd say, well, it's a product of the range.
Yeah, and we do have, for the gamma function, we do have system math.fact now.
Right. So there you have some kind of extra utility, whereas another language might have it built in. And in Q, I don't even know how you would do that, or if there's a library for that. Another one actually that would be interesting to mention here, because now we only said these languages that the four of us represent, but there are other array languages out there, and other APLs out there than Dyalog APL. NARS 2000, it has some limitations, and it's not very focused on performance. But
yeah, I think you're going to run into trouble with the performance there.
Yeah.
If you want to do machine learning type stuff.
Yes, but now we're discussing a little bit more generally math abilities, and for that it probably matches or even exceeds J in built-in vocabulary on mathy stuff, including primes and number theory and a whole lot of combinatorial stuff that it has built in, and also the extended precision and rationals and so on, octonions, and so there are other possibilities as well.
If we move away from the math for a second, one of the distinguishing things is that Dyalog, in the case of Dyalog, is proprietary, so it's not open sourced, which does make a difference to some people, both ways actually. Some people are much more comfortable with something that's proprietary that they know they can rely on, and versions aren't going to swap up too much. And other people want to go open source because they don't want a proprietary program that they're running from. So that is a distinguishing aspect between Dyalog APL, BQN, and J. I think BQN is open source, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
CBQN is GPL v3.
But Q is closed source.
And Q is closed source. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the distinguishing features about Q is that there's work for Q programmers. I mean, lots of it. I was surprised it wasn't on his list of criteria.
Well, if this is recreational, then maybe that doesn't matter so much. But they do want community support, right? And they want an active community, which it doesn't necessarily translate one-to-one with there's work available. Just because some companies use something for profit does not mean that there is a strong helping community for it, where you can just go and ask questions and get answers.
Yeah. One of his criteria says my language should be production ready. That is, people use this to solve real problems out in the world industry. So I'm kind of reading that as I want to be able to use this in the future in places where people write code.
I'm not sure that it means everybody will be using this as much as, it is not a hobbyist implementation of something. And so there, as I mentioned, NARS 2000 is kind of a hobby. It's a long-running hobby project, but nobody, as far as I know, uses NARS 2000 for anything industrial production, anything. It's only for playing around with APL. Same thing goes for lots of other APL implementations. I'm sure nobody uses, but some new April is used for a real product, physical product that's being sold. Then an interesting one for that one is, what's the state of BQN? Does anybody use? You wouldn't even know, right?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody that I know of is using it like as a product or anything. I've heard some people say they've used it for their work. I assume that means like to compute some quick things that are relevant to their work or something like that. Yeah, I think BQN is probably behind on stuff like the library sort of stuff, interfacing with different data formats and things like that you would want. So that would be why I would not recommend it here.
Interesting thinking about, what it is. Because, we all have our biases of what our personal favorite languages are, of course. But when someone lists out this criteria, I find it hard actually to... Because like my criteria, a lot of the times when I'm ranking my languages is like which language has the best combinator support, and BQN wins pretty handily there. But it also comes down to like I think I mentioned this earlier in the episode, and this can sort of segue us into talking more about sort of production code versus recreational coding and LeetCode and Advent of Code, is that when I solve Advent of Code or LeetCode problems, more specifically LeetCode, it's like if there's ever a thing within that problem that I need that only exists in one of the languages, I just immediately go and switch to that language. So for instance, I mentioned primes, I think earlier. Whenever there's primes involved, I'm probably just going to go to J. Like technically I can go to APL and go and open up the defunds library, and there's a PCO dot, and it has basically the replicated functionality that J has, but like J has it just with like P:, and you put a number on the left. And
yeah, but then you have to look up the number.
I have those I mean, honestly, you don't really, because like
what?
I just like type through them. The first one I know is like just gives you the first n primes. The second one is a bit mask given a iota sequence, and after that, it's just you just type them and then you see, and then you'll get a domain error if you don't know. I mean, you could go read the docs, but. And usually it's one of the first two. Anyways, the point being is like primes, I go to J. If I need to sort something in my problem, I go to BQN. I know, Adam, you've got your 3-character or 4-character reduced version of the 5-character, but BQN has it in 1 character. And that just like, especially if you need to put that sort in a tacit expression, that after or before or something, it's just very nice that I don't have to parenthesize the train of stuff. And so, what's an example of APL? Like they have... without, which doesn't exist in BQN. I think it does exist in J, but they also have decode and encode, which I don't think BQN has. And these don't make any of the languages like better than. It's not like, oh, BQN has a sort primitive, it's therefore obviously better than the other array languages. It's just that like usually when I'm solving these LeetCode problems, I'm trying to get the shortest, quickest thing. And if I know that, this language has something that might take 5 or 6 characters in another language, that's the language I'm going to go. And I have all 3 of them on my computer. And even if you don't, you can very quickly go and, go to the try APL or BQN pad. Anyway, so I'm not sure if folks have, because like that's when I read this list in my head, I'm just like, oh, well, they've got these primitive differences. But Alex clearly that's not what he's concerned with here. He's concerned with sort of documentation, ability to learn the language, community support, which it's a lot harder to judge. Like Bob said, a lot of these languages I think have, if you find the right place to go, good community support and good docs. Stephen, you were going to say something.
I'm really fascinated by what you were just saying, that you'll switch languages to save characters.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially if it's a LeetCode thing, which is like in array languages, it's typically going to be a one-liner thing, and especially like I've had this conversation with colleagues, is that like the verbosity of spelling something like affects the way you might solve a problem. Like the way I might solve something in BQN versus APL might be different due to the fact that like BQN doesn't have without, which you can spell with, I think 3 or 4.
Yeah. And this is because I think solving problems with without instead of with membership and filtering is actually not a good pattern. So that's very intentional.
And like I said, it's not to say one is worse, but like, and so maybe that even speaks to why, like, so I'll reach for something that Marshall thinks is like a bad pattern in APL, but I'll use it because it's convenient. It's 1 character with your numbers on either side of them. Whereas in BQN, I'll have to spell with more characters, but maybe that forces me to actually a better pattern, more performant code for some reason. But the point being is that like, I definitely think that like how the tax to spell something in a language, if you have multiple options and like perf is not like huge, it's going to be running in a fraction of a second, so I don't really need to worry about this going super fast. Like the tax of the number of characters of some function does like affect the way that I'm going to solve a problem if all I care about is how quickly I can solve this and like how short the expression is at the end of the day.
Well, Connor, maybe you should look into learning Jelly.
No, I mean, we'll link it in the show notes, but
it's unreadable. Is that what you're telling me? It uses Unicode characters.
It's not as pretty. It's not as pretty.
That's kind of the point that hooked my interest. It seems to me that it's aesthetics driving you on this.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, here's an anecdotal thing. Is like I actually plan to do Advent of Code in Rust this year because I'm learning Rust. It's a very nice language. It's quickly climbing through the ranks of my favorite languages. And I got to the first problem, and it was summing up like nested list of numbers and taking the maximum of those sums. And I was like, I can't do it. Like I'm going to APL. Like I'm not going to solve this in a language because I know how to spell that in every language. It's you're mapping sum over that and then doing a maximum, but like it's for 5 characters in APL or choose your language, like 5 or 6 is like, I can't, like it's, you know, if I'm working in a code base at C++ or Rust, sure, I'll go write it. But if I'm just doing this for fun and the whole goal of Advent of Code is to do it quickly and, you know, just hack out a solution, it's like, how can you beat max reduce plus reduce each, which is a single Unicode character? Like it's 5 characters. And it's like anyone that is even starting out to learn these languages is going to see that immediately. And it's going to maybe not hurt their soul, but it hurts my soul to have to go like maximum dot map sum. Anyways, that's I meant to do it in a different language. And then I was like, I can't, I'll just do it in APL or BQN or switch through the array languages as I go through it.
I'm beginning to see your bias against J because we start with digraphs, and so we've immediately got extra characters no matter what we do. We can't win.
You start with a penalty. Yeah.
Well, now there are plenty of 1-character primitives. You just have to choose which ones are going to be 1 characters.
Yeah. I will say the less than dot and greater than dot for max and min, it does hurt my soul a little bit because they're very simple expressions. Like if you want to do a min max fork, that's 3 characters in BQN and in APL, and it's 5 in J because you got those dots there. And I mean, potentially the listener is hearing this and being like, is this guy crazy? I'm being serious. Like it's an additional 67% of like your solution grew by almost twice the amount. And
hey, Connor, do you know why the prime function in the defense workspace is called PCO?
I know Roger Hui wrote it, and I think I read the doc at the top, but I don't know that it mentioned why it was called PCO.
I don't think it mentions it. If you look in the J documentation for the prime function, which is P:, then it's abbreviated in the URL as PCO. P::PCO.
I did not know that. So yeah, we should continue. I mean, I've been talking about Advent of Code and my clear, absolute desire to have things as short as possible. Like, is this a bad thing? You know, recreational coding? Because I think there's a ton of folks that sort of use array languages for this. Does it give array languages Marshall, you go ahead.
I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think in combination with the fact that code golf challenges have some very idiosyncratic things they focus on, it really skews your perception, because like one thing that's very common in code golf is like splitting numbers into their digits. If you're writing some real application, do you ever need to split a number into 2 digits? You don't. You need to format it for output to the user, but it's very unusual to care about the base 10 digits of a number. It's something that people write because it makes fun code golf challenges, because you can see, say like there's this, this number is the same when its digits are reversed. That's a cool property of a number that you see when you look at it, but it's not really an important aspect of the number, mathematically speaking. So like, yeah, this is one reason why a lot of people say, oh, well, BQN should have, base conversion functions. And I don't think that's really right. What we just added actually is a parse float function, which, I mean, that should work pretty well. And we have a format function that formats it the same way that the BQN session would format it. And we might add other number printing stuff, but I think that's what you want, practically speaking. But APL gets a leg up in all these CodeGull problems that are about reversing digits and stuff by having base encoding and decoding functions.
I mean, and you can even do it the shorter way, which I, for the longest time, would always do the decode or encode one, but you can do the eval each format.
Oh, yeah, that's just awful.
Which is like super. So like basically you turn, to read it in English, you turn your number into a string and then call the eval function that does the opposite of that. It turns your strings into numbers, but just do it on each of the characters in your string, which I think perf-wise is like terrible, but it does save you like 3 or 4 characters. So
yeah, well, and in BQN you don't have to eval. You can at least subtract 0, but then that takes more characters.
Yes, I've seen that in the BQN examples.
You have to write 2 single quotes to write the character 0. So,
Adam, you were going to say something?
For the listener, Stephen just made it like exemplary facepalm when you're doing. It's like that's how you do a facepalm. Yeah, I mean you can also if you're in quad IO 0, you can also index into quad D, which is a vector of the digits. It's about as short.
That's another thing that I love about APL. Speaking of when I reach for each language, is if I need to do the alphabet, like if I need the characters, you've got quad A for that, and you've also got quad C for uppercase, lowercase, and the equivalents. I'm not sure about J actually, but I know that like BQN currently doesn't have, like you have to do a iota 26 plus the character A, which is still actually quite nice.
Which is, I mean, the point is that's much more understandable, and you can do that for the Russian alphabet too, or whatever, whatever other alphabet. So
I'm not ever solving leak code in Russian though, so it's all good. But it is
Russian leak code is really hard, I bet.
It is an interesting point though that I think your comment, Marshall, was less that like there's a problem with trying to solve things, succinctly or tersely in an array language, but more that a lot of the code golfing problems or leak code problems that sort of come out of these contests aren't representative of the stuff that you're doing on a day-to-day basis when you're writing code. And maybe that is there a comment on advent of code, because that's one of the things that irritates me the most, and I never make it past problem 10, is it's mostly parsing. At least that's my experience.
That's less over time.
You mean towards the problems at the end of day 25?
As a total fraction of the work you're doing, the parsing gets pretty small near the end.
Right, because the problems are more involved. But yeah, do other folks have thoughts on like if that, and that's less a criticism, I guess, of solving these kinds of challenges in array languages and more just the challenges themselves, that they do things that are unrealistic. We'll go to Adam and then to Bob.
I don't think you are wrong in going for the right tool for the job. And I'd like to bring something up. You mentioned now I mentioned quad D, you said quad A for the alphabet. Why are these in there? Definitely not because Dyalog APL is trying to be a code golf language. Nobody has that kind of thing in mind. In fact, Roger Hugh would, and other people also would protest whenever they would see some suggested feature enhancement saying that's just for code golf. No way. But trying to make a language that makes it convenient to do certain things. I think Dyalog actually has less focused on that than certain other APL vendors. So Micro APL with their APLX and APL 2000 with their APL Plus, they will have these system variables that contain things that you might often need in a business application. So you think that quad D and quad A is a lot. APLX has also quad lowercase a.
What?
Which is unusual, yeah.
Since when?
I mean, APLX is obsolete. It doesn't get maintained anymore.
Oh, wait. This isn't Dyalog APL. This is APLX. Sorry, APL. I missed that part. I got very excited because that's 50% of the characters of quad C, quad A.
Yeah, the problem is that system names are case insensitive, so it's an exception to have a difference there in uppercase, lowercase. But it even has things like quad B for backspace, quad W for weekday names, and quad M for month names. Now you can actually get those in Dyalog APL fairly easily, but not as easy as that. So why did they do this? It's because you have some business person who's not really a programmer, but is able to, because of these array languages and their ease of expressing certain things, they can write their own application. And they shouldn't be bothered with trying to construct in some fancy way these constants. They need them all the time, right? They need the weekday names and they need the names of the...
Well, I mean, my contention would be you need the weekday names once per program, and you assign them to a variable somewhere in whatever program organization you have.
Sure, and true, but it sure is convenient to just say quad W. That's the weekday names. Done, right?
Yeah, well, and more so in code golf, where once per program could mean half of the program.
Yes. Sure.
And that is, before we get to Bob, what he was going to mention is, I just remember when you were talking about dates, is that this actually dates back before I even discovered array languages, is that whenever LeetCode would have a problem that had something to do with dates, like, figure out, given a month and a year, blah, 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 which day of the week is it? That's not, incredibly difficult, but it's tedious, dealing with leap years and blah, blah, blah. And so I would always solve most of those problems back at that time in C++, but I would switch to Java for that, because they had in their standard library like a date module that you could just literally go pass in the info and then print out, dot day or name of, and you're done. And it's like a one-liner. And it's like, I didn't know Java. Like, I know enough Java because it's similar to C++ in many ways. Different. I probably upset a bunch of listeners, but the syntax is roughly in the same ballpark. And once again, I would switch from my main language to an entirely one that I don't even know that well and just Google dates in Java, and then it becomes a one-liner. So it definitely, I think there is something to be said for adding convenience. Sorry, we'll go to Adam and then back to...
Oh, now I have to promote Dyalog APL because we added quad DT, and they can convert between any date time format known to mankind.
So we just need Dyalog APL on LeetCode, and then I can actually.
But no, I think I just now I have the word anyway. Throw in one more thing, something that might seem trivial, like the alphabet. I think even that kind of thing could have their value, and of course, doing it the BQN way is fine as well. But what people often resort to, if you don't have that, is typing out the alphabet, which on a QWERTY or any other non-alphabet order keyboard is kind of awkward to do. And that risks issues. So I just went on GitHub code search right now. I went into APL, typed quad A, copied the alphabet, went into GitHub code search, pasted it in, removed W and searched for it, and found 4,500 files on GitHub that includes the alphabet without W.
Damn.
Now, some of that might be intentional because some languages don't use W, whatever, but I'm thinking there are some problems there. There might be some bugs. Why would you want core utils without W in the...
A strong case for every array language to get quad A. You heard it here. All right, Bob, you've been waiting in the wings.
Well, and just to bring it back around to J, J has A dot, which is, I think, similar to BQN. It's got a full list of all the characters, and then you just index into them for what you need.
Your characters only go to 256.
Yes, A dot is different. That's the extended ASCII character set in J, which fittingly for J, which only uses ASCII.
Right. So that wasn't my point, though. My point was back to code golf. Is I think the negative part of code golf for the array languages is they get perceived as only being good for code golf, which obviously isn't true. But the other thing I think that's even sort of more nasty is if you write a lot of code golf, you're not writing actually necessarily very good array language. You're bending it to fit code golf. It usually isn't performant. Sometimes it is. I mean, it's a bit of a toss up whether it'll be performant or not. But it's usually not it doesn't usually use idioms that would be really useful if you were trying to actually use the language productively. So it actually sort of warps you into this array language mode where, you're doing, it's almost like doing circus tricks. Great. That's wonderful, but I'm not sure there's much call of it when we need to move something off the loading dock sort of thing.
So one thing that I sometimes see in BQN, which I think I've noticed it happening a fair amount, and I'm happy when I see it, is when the shortest solution in APL is some awful thing that includes like execute and random stuff. But then the shortest one in BQN is actually nice code.
Yeah, nice meaning performant here. We should define what the word nice means when you use it.
But 3 times as long.
well, nice being covers edge cases, performs better, uses array, a more array style. So, I mean, I'm not saying it always happens.
And takes 3 times as many characters.
No, usually like 50% more or something. But yeah, I mean, if BQN can lose at code golf by writing better code, that's a win at life, right? It's much better, actually. So
depends what you're living for, Marshall. I live for the character count. Steven? No?
You scared Steven off.
I mean, Q is so much more verbose than any other array language that uses symbols, at least. That code golf isn't everything, though. Sometimes you want to be quick to solution, right? And it might be fast to type. So, like, the shortest solution in an array language you'll have in using Jelly. We haven't touched upon Jelly. We should maybe have somebody come in and speak about it. Jelly
maybe I should give Jelly a shot. You know, I haven't been given it.
Yeah, Jelly is an amazing language, and me as an APLer, sometimes when I occasionally have written very little in Jelly, but you never need more to actually do anything. But sometimes I see something explained, I can read a little bit of it, and then I get envious because, like, why do I have to program in this programming language where everything is so tedious and I need to like spell out everything when it's right on your fingertips in Jelly, except it's not on your fingertips, because while technically speaking, you can type Jelly using the US International Keyboard. It requires you to put dots over and under letters. And
does it still have like the yeah, it does. It has this like unpronounceable expression for hello world, but like,
oh, that's different.
Yeah, the dictionary compression.
You don't have to do that. You can just type the string.
Yeah, like that. So that's the thing. Is like, but that's the first piece of code though on the README. It's like that is you got to change that, because as soon as I read that, I'm like, what? But like that isn't actually Jelly code. That's like a hack of converting it to something that then is still executable, but that's not actually like the way people are going to write Jelly code if they write. It is.
It's intended for code golf, and that's less characters.
Marshall.
Yes, if it's for code golf, yes. But I certainly know of people who are well versed in Jelly through code golf, who then use it for their daily needs as well. They need something computed, then why type more code when you can type less? And then obviously they wouldn't bother compressing all their strings. There's no point, right? But if you just want to get something done really quickly, then yeah, Jelly probably has a built-in for it. And if not, you can write tacit code to solve it, because Jelly only does tacit code.
All right, this is a pledge to listeners. I will go and learn Jelly to the extent that I've learned the other array languages, and I'll report back.
There's some program called Jelly Hypertraining that we can link to.
So BQN tries to force you in the quote-unquote better direction. APL has a different definition of better, and they do the same thing.
No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody tries to do that. It bothers me sometimes that it's shorter to write in APL function each split. So split takes, say, a matrix and mix it into a vector of vectors. And it's shorter to write that than to write function rank 1 and then fighting with the stranding.
Precedence, yeah.
So I don't think APL tries to make you write better code by making certain constructs awkward in any way. And it's perfectly possible to write bad code in APL, and I'm pretty sure you can write bad code in any of these array languages.
Well, in the framing here, I've never intentionally made something awkward in BQN. What I do is, for example, like for matrix division, I have no matrix division primitive. If you think I should have a matrix division primitive, the reason you think that is because APL has one. It's not because you considered all the things that you might want to do with arrays and said, oh, matrix division is a vitally important aspect. Every program should use matrix division, because like there are probably 10 programs in the entire world that use matrix division. All right, not that few, but So, I mean, what I do is I don't provide things that are convenient, but that don't actually fit into array programming. So some features that I think that indicate to me that a function is really a convenient function are when first, if it makes a lot of decisions for the user. So like matrix division decides inherently, what precision it's going to have versus what performance properties it's going to have. As the user, in a lot of cases, you would like to be in control, but for convenience, having it make the choice for you is nice. I think that's not the way primitives should work. Also, if I think primitives should be things that you actually use often, like many times in a program. And so something like APL partitioning is not actually used, like a program that uses partitioning a lot of times would use it like 4 or 5 times to maybe parse its input or something. Versus a program that uses like reverse a lot of times could have it, 20, 30, 100. And reverse is not even a particularly common primitive versus like something like catenate, which is, if you ever write a program without 4 copies of catenate, that's what are you even doing?
A lot of programs don't use square root.
Yeah. So that the main reason to include square root is not actually because I think it's a great primitive, but because I think it's an okay primitive and the symbol is well known. So, but in terms of other stuff like the matrix multiplication primitive, like base and encode, I think they are just they pack too much in, which is convenient, but I don't think that really fits into the model of array programming that makes it work well.
Language design is a real challenge. Like, there's just no way around it. When you're deciding what goes in and what goes out, and in the end, you're creating a language which, in the end, the old notation as a tool of thought creates the output that programmers can easily do with it. So I kind of agree with Marshall. It's not so much about making something difficult to do, but quite often you can shape people's behavior by what's easy to do. And if you make something easy to do, they're more likely to do it.
Yeah, and so I think the things that should be easy to do are not just like the conveniences or whatever, but they should be things that are fundamentally like good ways to think about problems. Like thinking in terms of plus scan. I think that's a lot of the time a great way to think about problems. It's connected to a lot of other primitives. It opens up, new possibilities if you really understand plus scan well. Thinking in terms of matrix division, well, I mean, it's a fundamental operation in linear algebra, but in other fields, it's not going to get you anywhere. So,
well, there's some problems where some optimization problems that you might not immediately connect with linear algebra, but are actually solvable using matrix division. I'm not defending here that matrix division is an APL, though it has been for a very long time. I'm just saying that sometimes having these tools available makes you realize that you can, when you look through what's in my toolbox, what can I use? I can use something that I might not immediately have associated with my problem domain, but use it in new novel ways. And a generalization of things can help with that. So many programming languages will have matrix multiplication, which in APL is known as plus dot times, and in J is plus/space dot times. But then this generalization of separating out the summation and the multiplication so that you can slot in other functions made people realize that this construct, actually, this pattern comes up in other domains and they can use it in all kinds of fanciful ways. Speaking of competitive and recreational programming, it used to be I think there were some APL newsletters that used to have some inner product with some 2 operands, and then challenging people to send in what can you use this construct for, right? This derived function for. And some of them are well known, or dot and dot equal, and some of them are more obscure. So I don't think you can just say what are the things that will be commonly used. By supplying you with something, that you might not commonly use by thinking of it immediately. You can expand your mind, apply things in new, novel ways you might not otherwise do.
But at the same time, if you're using an inner product many times in a program, what does that mean? It's more used in partition maybe, but you're seeing, 10 times in a program or something. It's very memorable when you use it, but it's not actually used often.
This brings us on to a use case for the Advent of Code competition I wasn't sure whether I'd talk about today, because I don't think it applies to the other array languages. A little bit of a story to this. There are a lot more Q programmers than there are K programmers. And Q, of course, is a domain-specific language for time series embedded in the K programming language. When the K programming language appeared, or this is my story about it anyway, people with a background in APL and J and Lisp jumped on it and said, "This is wonderful. This is just the language we need. It just the things we need." But people who were coming to use it from a completely unrelated background found it very strange. And Q was developed to let them get the use of KDB with a much shorter learning curve. So if you rock up for an introduction to the Q programming language, you're going to be shown some fairly simple stuff. It's very impressive how quickly you can get into productive use. But a lot of the thinking that's inherited from APL and J and Lisp, you kind of won't encounter. You're able to get to work using, for example, SQL-like query stuff without engaging with those concepts from the array languages. And this led to a thing. People would look at the kind of terse solutions written by people who come from an APL and K and J background and would say, how do you think that stuff? Where does that come from? And as I think I've spoken on the podcast about before, this led to the veterans getting dubbed the Q gods, as if it was some kind of divine thing. And of course, our biggest textbook got dubbed Q for Mortals. So, Advent of Code. Q being a proprietary language, a great deal of its user base being very secretive trading rooms. There's not been a lot of expert Q exposed to the world. And Advent of Code draws some of these veterans out of the woodwork and they start publishing Q solutions to the problems. And I've been at work over the last month scarfing these solutions up, some of them from private forums, and collating them in the hope of explaining them to the world, or to any rate to that part of the world that's interested. Because these solutions do show off some very, very smart people thinking through an array language paradigm and how to use Q in that way. And on a good day, when I'm smart enough and I can stumble through their solutions, I can break that down for a novice Q program. I've been doing that on our community repo on GitHub, Cubists/study Q. I'm up to, as of about lunchtime today, I'm up to day 15. And I'm hoping to be able to do the remaining 10 puzzles. So that's, for me, I think it's a very important use case for Advent of Code. The puzzles are relatively small, they're well understood, and it's a rare opportunity to see expert Q programmers at work on them.
And I think, we should compile a list not just of the Q ones, because I know, Marshall, you were updating, and I did see right before I joined the recording for this, is that you have a now graph version of all the folks that have been solving BQN. I guess we should qualify this as I'm on this list and I'm not a BQN expert. So I'm sure this is just an amalgamation of folks out in the wild. So there's going to be varying levels of expertise.
But I mean, one thing it does show is that a large number of people have decided, well, I don't know anything about array languages, but I'm going to try Advent of Code in BQN this year. And many of them have found some success with that. I mean, very few people have solved all of the problems in BQN, but most people, I was thinking even, how can I trim this list? And maybe I'll cut off the people who've only done one day in BQN, but there's like 4 of those people. So almost everybody chose to then, having solved their first day, do another day in BQN and so on. Of course, I don't have any information about the people who just tried and found it too hard and just dropped it. But it does seem that in a very short amount of time, you can learn enough with BQN to solve some not trivial problems.
Yeah, it's a good point that Stephen makes, is that, we've been talking about whether quote unquote recreational programming, leak code, Advent of Code, code golfing, is this, is a good thing, bad thing, and Stephen's point being that it's a great opportunity for people that are interested in a language and looking to learn, to be able to, especially at the start of Advent of Code, and most leak code problems, at least the first couple, are quite simple. They're digestible chunks that aren't going to take, a screen full of, it's very rare that there's a screen full of an array language code, but a lot of these, day one is going to be, what is that? Probably 3 primitives in Q, and similar to the other array languages. So whether it's Q, J, APL, BQN, these are, at least for me, I love watching little 5-minute YouTube videos of people walking you through this, because you can very quickly, and I think I was thinking this when, I can't remember if it was when Stephen was talking or something, that I kind of joke about the character count, but like potentially like I should stop joking about it, because it's not really that, it's so few characters. It is the ability to very succinctly express exactly what you want to do. And if I can do that in a language like Haskell that also spells out the primitives, that's just as beautiful for me, because it's removing the details that are unnecessary. Like when I'm writing things in C++, and in order to write a small unary function in the form of a lambda, there's so much noise that comes with it. Like literally every single type of brace or parentheses, the square ones, the curly ones, the round ones. I'm not joking. Every single one. You can add template parameters now ever since C++ 20 and put the angle chevron ones in there. Like there's a t-shirt joke that was given out at a conference that has left bracket, left angle, right angle, left paren, right paren, brace, semicolon. And that's like valid C++. Like and actually there's an extra set of left, right parentheses, because you can immediately invoke that previous valid C++ code. Like it's just like, bloop. It's it's not nonsense. It's the language we write in, but you compare that to any of the languages that we sort of talk about on this podcast, and it's just the essence of what you want to say. There's nothing extra.
Now, if you had unbalanced parentheses, you could do stuff in J.
If I had what?
Not actual parentheses.
You make a polyglot.
Well, yeah, it would be brackets actually and braces. We unbalance those. We don't have to match them up.
Oh, right, because of take and drop. Yeah. But
parentheses do balance. Yeah.
So I do get, it's a joke about the.
No, they don't, Bob. Not if you're defining stuff.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, under the old, yeah, for sure. There's single right paren. Yeah.
And Adam has. Oh, yeah, posted a link to something we'll put in the show notes that is not utterable on our family-friendly podcast. That is generates some JavaScript code, which is somewhat similar to the C++ code that I mentioned. But yeah, and do we have lists? So we've got a Q repository curated by yours truly, Stephen, with actual, hands. Are you showing multiple solutions, or is it one solution that are taken from different folks that are posting these online?
I've I've done a bit of both, actually. I've scarfed up and put in the scripts, at least commented out all the solutions I found. And you can see where I found them and who the authors were.
Oh, nice.
Some of these scripts are just like going for the solution as fast as possible, so you can, type it in on Advent of Code and get your gold star. I've been going through them, trying to work out the best way to bring out the concepts involved and show a Q-like approach. So I've also posted articles discussing them, and there's a single page which I just put up on our chat, which has kind of like the exhibition versions of the solutions.
And does Jay and APL, do we have similar things we can point folks that are interested in collections of these, or they're just out in the wild?
Out in the wild mostly. I guess Raul Miller has been doing a whole bunch of stuff with Advent of Code this year, and has done it in past years. And I think he's going to make it available on the wiki. I think we'll attach it to that, because there's some Advent of Code solutions and stuff in the wiki. They're not so much curated, I don't think. So in other words, I think what Stephen's doing is a much bigger service, and that he's sort of interpreting and explaining them. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think if you're looking for Advent of Code, either searching the forums in J or searching in the wiki, you'll find some, and you'll be able to read code that solves the problem.
Right, that we have in the APL wiki, the collection of Advent of Code. We mentioned this before, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. We mentioned that a couple episodes ago. Yeah. So we'll once again link all those. And yeah, I'm not sure if we're definitely once again past, the podcast that rarely ever meets the 60-minute mark that we aim for. I'm not sure if we want to circle back to sort of Alex's question. If there's anything we want to, after having talked about.
Are we still in announcements technically?
I feel like based on the criteria that Alex has given, you're not really going to go wrong with any of the languages, except I guess Marshall said that he wouldn't recommend BQN because of the nascency. Is that a word? Nascency? But for all the other ones, I think, there's communities that exist for all of them.
I found it interesting. It seems to me he's leaning towards machine learning because that's what he's doing professionally right now. And I was kind of thinking about whether any of these, a lot of people talk about these languages being perfectly, positioned to be able to take advantage of machine learning and AI and stuff.
I don't buy it.
And it just doesn't seem to me that that's taken off in that direction. Not saying it couldn't, but I haven't seen people exploiting that so much.
There is a paper called Convolutional Neural Networks in APL that was published at Array 20. Well, I think it was a few years ago at this point, but we'll link it in the show notes. So there has been some research and academic writings on the topic of it, and I think also doesn't Rodrigo have a video series of building up a neural network in APL and running it on some OCR database or something like that?
Yeah.
I do recall seeing a video.
Yes, there's a bunch more. There's an apl.wiki/nn will take you to stuff with neural networks, including Rodrigo's. So there's a whole collection there. One thing I'd like to comment on from the email, he said that he was planning on going through Ray Polivka's new book. And obviously, Ray Polivka is an authority when it comes to teaching APL, as he's been doing that for about twice as long as any of us has lived. But his new book is very raw. It is a draft in big red bold letters, and it's not even the target. He's not even in the target audience. He's a professional, right? And this is a book for beginners to even programming, intended for youngsters. So I'm not sure that's really the best resource to use for now.
So maybe what we should also do is, I'm not sure if we want to curate a list of these, but Stephen mentioned FunQ. Do we want to mention a book or two books for each language. If you have by the time you finish listening to this, Alex, if you've chosen your language and you want to start with a book or even maybe just a website, should we go around? And we already, I guess, got Fun Q from Steven, and Q for Mortals was talked about. I'm sure you've listened to the episode with Nick a couple episodes back.
Well, I would protest a little bit on that because it depends who you are.
All right. We're not going to do what I just said.
Depends who you are and what you're looking for. There can't be one set of learning materials that's the right for everybody.
But this is for Alex. And we're not talking about for folks.
So for him specifically.
We're talking about for Alex.
Okay.
We're speaking to you directly, Alex, now. if we weren't for the entire episode anyways.
That I'm with you on.
All right, go ahead, Adam. What is it for Dyalog APL?
I would say Stefan Kruger's book, Learning APL, is the right way in. And then once he's comfortable enough with that, then you can go on to things specifically about the subjects that he's interested in, like those neural networks resources.
Awesome. We now go to Bob for J.
I would lean on Henry Rich's book, J for C Programmers. Even though Alex isn't a C programmer, it's sort of consistent, that type of a programming language that, most people are familiar with. And it bases it on that and explains a lot of the concepts with array languages. And it's very comprehensive. It covers a lot of different topics. And one more thing I'll add for neural networks is if you go to J Playground and you go to examples, there is a running example of a neural network. And you can actually see the code and the results as well. And that's J Playground, which is online. So you don't even have to download J to do it. You can just flip that on, go to the example, go to neural networks, and run it. And it'll run in your browser.
All right. And last but not least, I don't think, to my knowledge, that there is a BQN book yet. Shout out to the listener, because you might be listening to this, and unless if I'm going to be corrected by Marshall in a second, you could write that book and then be the answer to this question in the future. But Marshall, where would you send?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know why everybody's talking about there's no one right resource for everyone. I mean, in BQN, the right resource is the BQN tutorials and documentation, because that's all we've got. So.
And it is very good.
It is. We talked about that on a previous episode. It's
the tutorial is cut off in somewhere around 2/3 of the way through the 4th tutorial. But other than that,
yeah. I mean, I almost always go to BQN when I'm switching between, because I think I mentioned this like 5 times before. They have dictionaries, multi-directional dictionaries with J and APL and BQN. And so a lot of the times I'll just go there. Even if I'm not trying to do something in BQN, sometimes I'm going from APL to J, and I will go through BQN as an IR in order to figure out what I'm trying to do. Probably not the best way to do it, but those docs are so great that they are useful for that. All right. Anything? We've got tons of recommendations in this episode. Adam's got his hand up.
Well, so I'd like to make it a little bit more general also then, that the APL Wiki has this page called Learning Resources, where things are exactly classified into what kind of person are you, and then some resources that might fit you for that. And the K Wiki also has a page of learning resources. It's not really classified as much. Well, it's not classified by who you are, but it has a list of that. And so on. JWiki, I think, has a list of learning resources somewhere that we can link to.
Yep, we have newcomers.
And BQN, there's only one source of learning materials. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a community page that links to a few things that other people have done, like their Connors videos and another person's done videos.
The BQN book, it's coming soon. I could tell you, they've got the Rust book. The BQN book sounds even better because it's an alliteration.
Bacon, the best parts.
Bacon, the crunchy bits.
Look at that. We got, what is that, 3-4 book titles? The listeners, we gotta start crowdsourcing this before you know it.
We just need the content.
All we need is the text. It's the easy part.
Now, if we could only name a podcast.
Working on it. Well,
oh man, do I put spaces in my book title or not?
Oh no. But see, APL has a primitive that can remove spaces. So there's that.
Oh, that's right. Without. I was like, what? I thought you meant all in one.
Yeah, you have to give it the right
right, yeah.
The space,
dyadic. I was thinking there's a unary function that removes white spaces. I was like,
no.
But, so you're clearly short one because you don't have a primitive that can add spaces in at the appropriate spots.
Yeah, J has that kind of, right?
We need a primitive that goes from ArrayCast to the ArrayCast because, I mean, that's something we need to be able to do.
All right, we'll do that solve that live on a future episode of ArrayCast. All right, we'll wrap it up there. We'll throw it to Bob. You can reach us at
contact@arraycast.com. That's ArrayCast, one word, no spaces. So there you go. Don't worry about the capitalization. It's not that important. But contact@arraycast.com. And that's how Alex got in touch with us, as a number of other people did. So thank you for sending in your emails. And what we usually do is I forward them on to the Slack group. That doesn't mean I reply to everyone. When I get a chance to, I do reply to them just to give some feedback that we got it. And thanks for contacting us. But they do go into the Slack group, so everybody who's on the panel gets a chance to see what's being sent in. And if there are comments back, we send them back to you. So that's a good way to get in touch with us and propose ideas or guests or anything else you'd like to hear or criticisms that you have of what we're doing. If you've made it this far into the program, holy smokes. I don't know whether I want to hear somebody who's persistent enough to listen to this and they're still very critical. But yeah, if you've got things we could do better, let us know and we'll see what we can do. Or maybe we'll have you on and you can show us how we would do it. But that's all we got.
Yeah, I think this is what our second response to a person that wrote in, because I think we did this once before. But yeah, you are not guaranteed that your letter will get turned into a podcast episode or part of a podcast episode. But if you do have questions that you'd like to have answered, yeah, we do these every once in a while. I guess we're one per year at the moment, but we could increase the frequency if that's what the people want.
We have brought in guests based on people's suggestions, so that certainly has happened, which has been really useful in widening out, because there are a lot of array language and array language adjacent groups that we aren't always aware of. Actually, probably between Stephen, Marshall, and Adám, I think they're probably aware of just about everything, but it does give me some focus on who might be interested in talk to. And John Ernest was a example of one of those, although I think it was Stephen Apter and Joel Kaplan had already suggested him, but there were listeners that said, yeah, you should really talk to him. And obviously we did, and we should have. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those that, we mentioned bringing on someone from Jelly, it is on our roadmap to kind of get representatives of some of these, I don't want to say less well known, but like outside the Iversonian language circle. Like I think Niall actually might be in the circle, but languages like Julia, etc., that are Marshall's smiling because he's ready at the door to knock someone out. But we definitely plan on having some language representatives or creators to come on to talk about these other sort of either less well known or sort of, not in the top 5 languages that we're talking about on this podcast, which should be great conversations when we get to those. But with that, we will say Happy New Year and happy array programming.
Happy
Array programming.